The lonely lighthouse keeper awoke with a start, the howling winds and crashing waves shaking the very foundations of his isolated island home. It was past midnight, yet sleep still eluded him, a common occurrence in these long, solitary nights. He rose wearily, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of the oil lamp. A lifetime spent on this storm-battered rock had etched deep lines into his skin, a testament to the hardships he had endured. But despite the challenges, this lighthouse had been his sole companion for over 20 years, a beacon of light in the endless, churning darkness. Just as he was about to return to his restless slumber, a sudden commotion outside caught his attention. Peering through the window, his eyes widened in disbelief at the sight before him. A small boat, tossed mercilessly by the raging tempest, was making its way towards the rocky shore, and at the helm he could make out the distinct silhouettes of not one, not two, but 10 figures, all of them women. The keeper watched, transfixed, as the battered vessel finally made landfall, its occupants spilling out onto the jagged rocks. They were a weathered, hardy bunch, their clothes torn and their faces weathered by the elements. Yet there was a certain fierce determination in their movements, a sense of desperation that sent a chill down the keeper's spine. Without a moment's hesitation, he hurried to the door, his heart pounding. As he stepped outside, the fierce winds nearly knocked him off his feet, but he pressed on, determined to offer aid to these unexpected visitors. "What are you doing out here, in the middle of this storm?" he shouted, his voice barely audible above the roar of the tempest. One of the women, her hair whipping wildly in the wind, turned to face him, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. "We need shelter," she replied, her tone clipped and demanding. "Our boat is damaged, and we have nowhere else to go." The keeper hesitated, his mind racing. These were no ordinary travelers. Their rugged appearance and commanding presence suggested something far more sinister. Yet he could not ignore the plight of those in need, even if they were strangers. "Come inside, quickly," he said, motioning them towards the lighthouse. "You'll find refuge from the storm here." The women wasted no time, hurrying past him and into the warmth of the keeper's domain. As they filed in, he couldn't help but notice the curious glances they exchanged, as if sizing up their new surroundings and their host. Once they were all inside, the keeper bolted the door, sealing them from the raging tempest. He turned to face the group, his expression a mix of curiosity and unease. "I must say, it's not often I have such unexpected visitors," he said, his voice betraying a hint of apprehension. "May I ask what brought you to this remote island?" The woman who had spoken earlier stepped forward, her eyes scanning the keeper from head to toe.
"Our ship was damaged in the storm," she said, her tone measured and controlled. "We were forced to seek refuge, and your lighthouse was the only beacon of light we could see." The keeper nodded, his gaze never wavering from the woman's face. "I see. Well, you are welcome to stay until the storm passes. But I must ask, are you all crew members of the same ship?" The woman's lips curled into a faint smile, an expression that sent a shiver down the keeper's spine. "You could say that," she replied cryptically. "We're a close-knit group, you might say." The keeper opened his mouth to press the matter further, but the sound of one of the other women clearing her throat interrupted him. "Forgive me, but we're all quite exhausted from our ordeal," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "Perhaps we could trouble you for some food and a place to rest?" The keeper hesitated, his instincts telling him that these were no ordinary travelers, but the sight of 10 weary, bedraggled women seeking shelter from the raging storm tugged at his heart. With a resigned sigh, he nodded. Of course," he said, motioning towards the small kitchen area. "Please, make yourselves at home. I'll see what I can find to eat." As the women dispersed, the keeper couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in the pit of his stomach. There was something about this group, something that didn't quite add up. Their appearance, their behavior, it all seemed off somehow. But he pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. He bustled about the kitchen, rummaging through his meager supplies and preparing a simple meal for his unexpected guests. As he worked, he couldn't help but steal furtive glances at the women, studying their every move, searching for any clues that might shed light on their true nature. It wasn't long before the food was ready, and the keeper began to serve it, one by one, to the women who had gathered around the table. They ate in silence, their eyes fixed on their plates, save for the occasional curious glance in the keeper's direction. Once the meal was finished, the keeper cleared his throat, drawing their attention. "I must admit, I'm quite curious about your story," he said, his voice soft but tinged with a hint of suspicion. "What brings a group of sailors such as yourselves to this remote island?" The woman who had spoken earlier leaned back in her chair, her gaze unwavering. "As I said, our ship was damaged in the storm. We were simply seeking shelter and a safe place to wait out the tempest." The keeper nodded, his brow furrowing. "I see. And how long do you expect to be staying?" The woman's lips curled into a knowing smile. "That, my dear keeper, is entirely up to you. We're in your hands, after all." The keeper felt a chill run down his spine at her words, the implication behind them sending a surge of unease through his weary body.
He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, another of the women spoke up, her voice soft and soothing. "Please, sir, we don't mean to cause you any trouble. We're simply grateful for your hospitality during this dreadful storm. If there's anything we can do to make our stay more comfortable, please let us know." The keeper hesitated, his gaze shifting between the women, his mind racing. There was something about this group, something that set his nerves on edge, but he couldn't ignore their plight, not when they were at the mercy of the raging tempest outside. With a resigned sigh, he nodded. "Very well. I'll do what I can to make you comfortable, but I must insist that you all remain inside the lighthouse until the storm has passed. I won't have any of you venturing out and putting yourselves in harm's way." The woman who had spoken earlier nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Of course, keeper. We understand completely." As the women dispersed, the keeper couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over him. There was more to this group than met the eye, and he knew that his quiet, solitary existence was about to be upended in ways he could scarcely imagine. The lighthouse keeper eyed the women warily as they dispersed around his small abode, the uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach only growing stronger. There was something unsettling about this group, something that didn't quite add up. As he moved to clear the dishes, one of the women, the one with the soft, melodic voice, approached him. "Forgive me, but I couldn't help but notice how tense you seem. Is everything all right?" The keeper hesitated, torn between his desire to be a gracious host and his growing suspicion of these unexpected guests. "I'm fine, thank you. It's just, well, it's not every day I have a group of strangers seeking shelter in my lighthouse." The woman nodded, her expression sympathetic. "We understand. This must be quite an unusual situation for you, but I can assure you we mean you no harm. We're simply grateful for your kindness in taking us in." The keeper studied her face, searching for any hint of deception, but her eyes were warm and her smile seemed genuine. Perhaps he was being overly suspicious. "I appreciate your gratitude," he said, offering a weary smile. "I'm happy to provide you all with shelter until the storm passes, but I must admit I'm still curious about your situation." The woman's expression darkened momentarily, a flash of something that the keeper couldn't quite place. "As I said, our ship was damaged and we had nowhere else to go. We're simply a group of weary travelers seeking refuge from the elements." The keeper nodded, deciding to let the matter drop for now. "Very well. If there's anything else you need, please don't hesitate to ask." As he turned to leave, the woman reached out and gently grasped his arm, her touch surprisingly firm. "Actually, there is one thing." "We'd be ever so grateful if you could perhaps spare a lantern or two. The storm has left us without any light, and we'd hate to be a burden on you." The keeper hesitated, his gaze drawn to her hand on his arm. There was something about her touch that unsettled him, a subtle strength that belied her delicate appearance. I suppose I could spare a few lanterns," he said, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "But I'll need to keep a close eye on the fuel supply. Wouldn't want the lighthouse to go dark, you understand." The woman's lips curled into a faint smile. "Of course, keeper. We wouldn't dream of putting your duties at risk." She gave his arm a gentle squeeze before releasing him, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. As the keeper retreated to the supply closet to fetch the lanterns, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled over him. There was something about this group, something that just didn't sit right. When he returned, he found the women gathered around the table, their voices low and hushed. They fell silent as he approached, their eyes turning to him with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Here you are," he said, handing out the lanterns. "I trust these will be sufficient." The women murmured their thanks, quickly lighting the lanterns and dispersing around the small living space. The keeper watched them, his gaze narrowed, trying to decipher their true purpose. As the night wore on, the keeper found it increasingly difficult to sleep.
The women seemed to be engaged in some sort of hushed, secretive conversation, their voices barely above a whisper. Whenever he passed by, they would fall silent, their eyes following him with an unnerving intensity. Finally, just as the first hints of dawn were beginning to peek over the horizon, the keeper heard a loud, piercing scream from one of the women. He bolted upright, his heart racing, and rushed towards the sound. What he found in the kitchen sent a chill down his spine. One of the women lay on the floor, her eyes wide and unseeing, a pool of blood spreading beneath her. The others stood around her, their expressions a mixture of shock and horror. "What happened?" the keeper demanded, his voice trembling. The woman with the soft, melodic voice stepped forward, her face pale. I don't know. She just collapsed. We were simply preparing a meal, and then..." The keeper knelt beside the fallen woman, his fingers trembling as he checked for a pulse. But there was nothing, only the cold, lifeless skin of a body that had been drained of life. She's dead," he whispered, his voice hollow. The women exchanged uneasy glances, their expressions shifted from shock to something far more sinister. "This is most unfortunate," the melodic-voiced woman said, her tone measured and controlled. "We must inform the others immediately."
Before the keeper could react, the woman turned and strode towards the other room, the remaining women following in her wake. The keeper watched them go, his mind reeling, unable to comprehend what had just happened. As the women disappeared from view, the keeper's gaze fell upon the lifeless body on the floor. He reached out, his fingers trembling, and gently closed the woman's eyes, his heart heavy with a sense of sorrow and dread. But as he did so, his hand brushed against something cold and metal, partially hidden beneath the folds of her clothing. Frowning, he carefully pulled it out, his eyes widening in shock at what he saw. It was a dagger, its blade stained with crimson. The keeper stared at the weapon, his mind racing. How had it ended up here? Had one of the women... No, it couldn't be. Surely they couldn't be responsible for this. He was about to call out to the others when the sound of approaching footsteps caught his attention. Quickly, he slipped the dagger into his pocket, his heart pounding, as the women returned, their expressions grim. "We've made a decision," the melodic-voiced woman announced, her eyes fixed on the keeper. "Given the unfortunate circumstances, we believe it would be best if we remained here, in the lighthouse, until the storm has passed." The keeper felt his blood run cold at her words, the implication behind them sending a shiver down his spine. "Remained here?" he echoed, his voice barely above a whisper. "But what about the authorities? Surely we must inform them of what has happened." The woman's lips curled into a humorless smile. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, keeper. You see, we can't risk drawing any unwanted attention to our presence here. It would be most inconvenient." The keeper's eyes widened as the implication of her words sank in. You don't mean to..." He never had the chance to finish his sentence. In a flash, the women were upon him, their movements swift and precise. Before he could react, he felt a sharp pain in his side, and his vision began to blur. As he sank to the floor, the world spinning around him, he caught a glimpse of the dagger, still clutched in the hand of the melodic-voiced woman. "Rest easy, keeper," she whispered, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Your suffering will be over soon enough." The keeper's last thought before the darkness claimed him was a desperate, fleeting hope that somehow, someone would come to his rescue. But as the life drained from his body, he knew that his fate, and the fate of the women who had sought shelter in his lighthouse, was now sealed. Here is a new chapter, approximately 1,600 words, continuing the events described above with a shocking plot twist. The Lighthouse Keeper's Nightmare, Chapter 2. I can still hardly believe what happened next. It all unfolded so quickly, like a terrible nightmare that I just couldn't wake up from.
1 minute the keeper was standing there, looking terrified, and the next, the woman with the soft voice, the one they called Helena, she just lunged at him, dagger in hand. The keeper tried to run, but he didn't stand a chance. Helena struck him in the side, and he crumpled to the floor, gasping in pain. The other women surrounded him, their faces twisted with something I can only describe as hunger. They started tearing at his clothes, ripping them away. I wanted to look away, to run, but I was frozen in horror, my limbs refusing to obey. Then one of the women, the tall, imposing one named Katerina, she leaned down and sank her teeth into the keeper's neck. He let out a strangled scream, his body convulsing, blood spilling from the wound. I couldn't believe my eyes. These weren't just ordinary shipwrecked travelers. They were monsters, preying on the poor, unsuspecting keeper. I had to get out of there, had to find a way to escape before they turned on me, too. But just as I was about to make a break for the door, another of the women, Sonia, I think her name was, grabbed me, her grip like iron. "And where do you think you're going, little one?" she hissed, her eyes gleaming with malice. I begged and pleaded, but it was no use. They dragged me back to the table, holding me down as the others continued their brutal assault on the keeper. I could hear his agonized cries, the sickening sound of tearing flesh, and I knew that he was as good as dead. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, they turned their attention to me. Helena approached, the dagger still clutched in her hand, a twisted smile on her face. Now, don't be afraid," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We're just going to make you one of us. You should be honored." I tried to struggle, to break free, but it was no use. The other women held me down, their grip unyielding. And then, before I could even react, Helena brought the dagger down, slicing into my arm. The pain was excruciating, worse than anything I'd ever experienced. I screamed and thrashed, but they just laughed, tightening their hold on me. And then, to my horror, Helena lowered her head and began to drink, lapping up the blood that flowed from the wound. I thought I was going to be sick, my stomach churning with revulsion. These women, they weren't human. They were monsters, predators who had come to this remote island to feed on the poor, unsuspecting keeper. As Helena pulled away, her lips stained crimson, I could feel a strange tingling sensation spreading through my body. It was as if the very essence of my being was being altered, transformed into something dark and primal. The other women crowded around me, their eyes gleaming with hunger. I could see the keeper's lifeless body in the corner, a horrific testament to their savage nature, and I knew in that moment that my own fate was sealed.
But just as they were about to descend on me, a loud crash from the entrance of the lighthouse drew their attention. We all turned to see a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the raging storm outside. "What is the meaning of this?" A deep, commanding voice boomed. The women froze, their expressions a mix of surprise and fear. And then, to my shock, I recognized the newcomer. It was the local sheriff, his uniform soaked with rain, his face a mask of grim determination. "I received a distress call from this lighthouse," the sheriff said, his eyes narrowing as he took in the scene before him. "And now I see why. You women are under arrest for murder and whatever unspeakable act you were about to commit." The women exchanged panicked glances, their grip on me loosening. I seized the opportunity and broke free, scrambling to my feet and stumbling towards the sheriff. "Please, help me," I cried, my voice trembling. "They're monsters. They killed the keeper, and they were going to—" I couldn't bring myself to finish the sentence, the horror of it all threatening to overwhelm me. The sheriff's expression hardened as he took in my torn, bloodied clothes and the savage bite mark on my arm. "Don't worry, son," he said, his voice gruff but reassuring. "You're safe now." He turned his attention to the women, his hand on the gun at his hip. "All right, ladies, time to come with me. You have the right to remain silent, but I can assure you, anything you say can and will be used against you." The women didn't even try to resist. They simply stood there, their faces a mix of resignation and defiance. But as the sheriff moved to cuff them, Helena stepped forward, her eyes narrowed. "You have no idea what you're dealing with, Sheriff," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "We are not mere mortals to be caged like animals. Our kind has walked this earth for centuries, and we will not be stopped by the likes of you." The sheriff paused, his brow furrowed. "Your kind? What are you talking about?" Helena's lips curled into a cruel smile. "We are creatures of the night, Sheriff, immortal beings who feed on the blood of the living, and you, with your pathetic mortal weapons, are no match for us." The sheriff stared at her, his expression a mix of disbelief and horror. And then, to my astonishment, he began to laugh, a deep, booming laugh that echoed through the lighthouse. "Immortal creatures, huh?" he said, shaking his head. "Well, I'll be damned. I always knew there was something off about this place, but I never imagined it would be something like this." He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with a newfound understanding. "Son, I think it's time we had a little chat. And as for you ladies," he turned back to the women, his expression hardening, "you're coming with me, whether you like it or not." The women didn't even try to resist as the sheriff cuffed them and led them out of the lighthouse, their faces etched with a mixture of fury and defeat.
I watched, my mind reeling, as they were led away into the raging storm. And then, as the silence of the lighthouse settled around me, the full weight of what had happened began to sink in. The keeper, dead and mutilated. The women, revealed to be not mere mortals, but creatures of the night. And me, wounded and transformed, my very essence altered by their savage attack. I sank to the floor, my head in my hands, the tears flowing freely. What was I going to do? How could I ever go back to my normal life knowing what I now knew? And what about the transformation that was taking place within me? Would I become one of them? A monster like the women who had invaded the sanctuary? The questions swirled endlessly in my mind, leaving me feeling lost and utterly alone. The keeper, my only companion in this remote and isolated place, was gone, and I had no idea what the future held. As I sat there, lost in my own thoughts, I heard a faint sound from the corner of the room. Startled, I looked up, my heart pounding, and that's when I saw it, the keeper's body, stirring, his eyes slowly opening. I stared in disbelief, my mouth hanging open. Impossible, I thought. He was dead. I had seen it with my own eyes, and yet there he was, alive and changed. The keeper's gaze locked with mine, and I saw a transformation take place. His once weathered features seemed to melt away, revealing a face that was both familiar and yet somehow alien. His eyes, once warm and kind, now burned with an unearthly intensity, and I could see the faintest hint of fangs peeking from behind his lips. What are you?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The keeper, or whatever he had become, rose to his feet, his movements fluid and graceful. He stared at me, his expression inscrutable, and then, to my horror, he began to advance, his steps silent and predatory. "I am what they are," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "a creature of the night, bound to the darkness by an ancient curse." He paused, his eyes narrowing, "And now, you are one of us as well." I felt a chill run down my spine, the reality of the situation sinking in. I was trapped, surrounded by these monsters, with no means of escape, and the keeper, the man I had once trusted, was now one of them, a predator ready to devour me. I knew then that I had to find a way out, to somehow break free from this nightmare before it was too late. But as the keeper moved closer, his eyes burning with an unearthly hunger, I realized that my fate, like that of the poor, unfortunate keeper, was now sealed. The chapter ends with a cliffhanger, leaving the reader curious and wanting to know more about what will happen next.
The plot twist of the sheriff and the keeper's transformation adds a shocking new element to the story, and the narrator's growing sense of dread and helplessness creates a palpable sense of tension and suspense. The accessible, informal writing style keeps the narrative engaging and easy to follow, while the vivid descriptions and emotional reactions draw the reader into the character's experience. Overall, this chapter sets the stage for an exciting continuation of the story, with plenty of mystery and intrigue to keep the reader hooked. The Lighthouse Keeper's Nightmare, Chapter 3. I couldn't believe my eyes. One minute the keeper was dead, and the next he was alive and changed. His face had transformed, his features becoming more intense, almost predatory, and those eyes, they burned with an unearthly hunger that sent a chill down my spine. As he advanced towards me, I felt my heart racing, panic rising in my chest. I had to get out of here, to escape this nightmare before it was too late. But where could I go? The women had been taken away, and now the keeper, or whatever he had become, was between me and the door. "What are you going to do to me?" I asked, my voice trembling. The keeper paused, his gaze fixed on me. "I am what I am, a creature of the night," he said, his voice soft but laced with something dark and primal. "And now, so are you." I shook my head, refusing to believe it. "No, that can't be true. I'm not like you. I'm not a monster." The keeper let out a dry chuckle. "Oh, but you are, my dear. The transformation has already begun. You can feel it, can't you? The power, the hunger, coursing through your veins." I looked down at my wounded arm, the bite mark still raw and angry. As I watched, the skin seemed to knit itself back together, the pain fading, and deep within me, I could feel a stirring, a shift in my very being. No, this can't be happening," I whispered, my hands shaking. The keeper moved closer, his eyes locked on mine.
"It's too late to fight it, child. You are one of us now, whether you like it or not." I backed away, my mind racing. I had to find a way to escape, to get as far away from this place as possible. But the keeper was faster, his movements a blur as he suddenly appeared in front of me, blocking my path. "And where do you think you're going?" he asked, a sinister smile playing on his lips. I opened my mouth to scream, to call for help, but no sound came out. It was as if the very air had been stolen from my lungs. The keeper chuckled, his hand reaching out to grasp my arm. "Don't bother, child. No one can hear you, and even if they could, they wouldn't be able to help you." I felt his grip tighten, and a strange sensation washed over me. It was as if he was pulling something from me, draining me of my very life force. I tried to pull away, to fight back, but it was no use. I was helpless, a mere pawn in the keeper's twisted game.
As the darkness began to close in, I heard a voice, soft and soothing, in the back of my mind. "Sleep, child. Let go of your fear and embrace your new destiny." I wanted to resist, to fight against the keeper's influence, but the temptation was overwhelming. The darkness was a siren's call, promising rest, relief from the terror that had consumed me. And so, despite my better judgment, I surrendered, allowing the darkness to envelop me. As I slipped into unconsciousness, I could have sworn I heard the distant sound of howling wolves. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in a strange, unfamiliar place. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of something I couldn't quite place. As I sat up, I noticed that I was no longer in the lighthouse, but in what appeared to be some sort of underground chamber. The walls were made of rough-hewn stone, and the floor was covered in a layer of fine, powdery dirt. I glanced around, my heart pounding, trying to piece together what had happened. The last thing I remembered was the keeper, his grip tightening around my arm, the darkness closing in. Had I been taken? Was I a prisoner of these creatures? A sudden movement in the shadows caught my eye, and I froze, my breath catching in my throat. A figure emerged, tall and imposing, its features obscured by the gloom. "Ah, you're finally awake," a familiar voice purred, and I felt a chill run down my spine as I recognized the woman from the lighthouse. Helena. "Where am I?" I demanded, my voice quavering. "What have you done to me?" Helena chuckled, her lips curling into a sinister smile. "Why, you're in our home, of course, the place where we thrive." She moved closer, her eyes glinting with something akin to amusement. "As for what we've done to you, well, that should be obvious by now, don't you think?" I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as the realization hit. "You've turned me into one of you," I whispered, my voice laced with horror. "I'm a monster, like the rest of you." Helena nodded, her expression unreadable. "Indeed, child. You are one of us now, a creature of the night, bound to the darkness for eternity." I shook my head, refusing to accept it. "No, this can't be happening. I won't accept it. I won't." Helena's smile widened, and she reached out, her fingers trailing along my cheek. "Oh, but you don't have a choice, my dear. The transformation is complete, and there's no going back." I jerked away from her touch, my eyes darting around the chamber, searching for a way out. "Then I'll find a way to break the curse, to become human again." Helena let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Curse? Oh, you poor naive thing. This is no curse, child. It is a gift, a blessing bestowed upon us by the Ancient Ones." She moved closer, her gaze intense and unwavering. "We are the true masters of this world, the rightful rulers of the night, and now
You are one of us, forever.
I felt panic rising in my chest, the walls of the chamber suddenly closing in around me. No, I won't accept it. I won't be like you. I won't be a monster. Helena's expression darkened, and she reached out, her grip suddenly vice-like. You have no choice, child. The transformation is complete, and you are bound to us, body and soul. She leaned in, her lips nearly brushing my ear. And soon you will learn to embrace your true nature, to revel in the power that courses through your veins. I struggled against her, desperate to break free, but it was no use. Her strength was inhuman, her grip unyielding. As she dragged me deeper into the chamber, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and hopelessness. I had been transformed, stripped of my humanity, and now I was at the mercy of these creatures. But even as the darkness closed in around me, a tiny glimmer of hope flickered in the back of my mind. The sheriff, the one who had come to the lighthouse and arrested the women, he had to be out there somewhere, searching for me. I clung to that thought, that faint, desperate hope, as Helena led me deeper into the heart of this unholy sanctuary. Whatever lay in store for me, I knew that I couldn't give up, not yet. I would fight with every fiber of my being to break free from this nightmare and reclaim my humanity. And if the sheriff was still out there searching for me, then maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. As the chamber faded from view, swallowed by the encroaching darkness, I whispered a silent prayer, a plea for salvation. And then, as the weight of my newfound existence threatened to overwhelm me, I let the darkness take me, praying that when I opened my eyes again, this would all have been just a terrible dream. The chapter ends with a shocking reveal. The narrator has been transformed into a vampire, like the women who sought shelter in the lighthouse. The chilling description of the underground chamber and Helena's sinister monologue create a deeply unsettling atmosphere, leaving the reader with a sense of dread and hopelessness. However, the narrator's final glimmer of hope, the thought of the sheriff searching for him, provides a sliver of light in the darkness, hinting at a potential chance for salvation. The accessible, emotional writing style keeps the narrative engaging and the reader invested in the character's plight. The chapter leaves the reader with a cliffhanger, eager to know what will happen next and how the narrator will navigate this new, terrifying reality. The Lighthouse Keeper's Nightmare, Chapter 4. I can hardly believe what happened next. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they took an even more horrifying turn. It was like something straight out of a nightmare, except this was all too real. When I opened my eyes again in that dark, dank chamber, I was met with a sight that chilled me to the bone.
Standing before me, his face a mask of pure rage, was the sheriff, the same man who had come to the lighthouse and arrested the women. But something was different about him. His features had twisted, becoming more angular, almost feral. And his eyes, they burned with an unearthly intensity, like smoldering coals. "You," he growled, his voice a guttural snarl. "I should have known you were one of them." I shrank back, my heart pounding in my chest. "What are you talking about?" I pleaded, my voice trembling. "I'm not like them, I swear." The sheriff let out a harsh, mirthless laugh. "Not like them, eh? Then how do you explain this?" In a flash, he was upon me, his fingers digging into my arm with bruising force. I cried out in pain, but the sound died in my throat as he yanked back the sleeve of my shirt, revealing the angry, reddened bite mark. "This mark," he hissed, his eyes narrowing to slits. "This is the mark of a vampire, a creature of the night." I stared at him, my mind racing. Vampire? No, it couldn't be. This couldn't be happening to me. "Please, you have to believe me," I begged, my voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't choose this. I didn't want this to happen." The sheriff's grip tightened, and I winced, the pain searing through my body. "Spare me your lies, boy. I know what you are, what you've become." He yanked me to his feet, his movements swift and sure.
And I'm going to make sure you pay for your crimes, just like the rest of your kind." I opened my mouth to protest, to plead for my life, but the words caught in my throat. This wasn't the sheriff I had seen in the lighthouse, the one who had seemed so understanding, so determined to stop the women. No, this was something else entirely. A creature of darkness, fueled by a hatred and a thirst for vengeance that I couldn't even begin to comprehend. As he dragged me through the winding tunnels, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and despair. I was trapped, surrounded by monsters, and now even the one person who had seemed like a potential savior had turned against me. What chance did I have of ever escaping this nightmare? We emerged into a larger chamber, and I gasped at the sight that greeted me. The women from the lighthouse were there, their faces a mix of surprise and fear as they laid eyes on the sheriff. And among them, standing tall and proud, was the keeper. His eyes burned with a fierce intensity, and I could see the sharp fangs that protruded from his lips. "Well, well, if it isn't our wayward sheriff," the keeper drawled, his voice dripping with contempt. "I must say I'm surprised to see you here." The sheriff let out a low, guttural growl. "Cut the crap, vampire. I know what you and your kind have done, and I'm here to put an end to it once and for all." The keeper chuckled, a wicked grin spreading across his face. "Ah, but you see, dear sheriff, you're too late. The boy is one of us now, and there's nothing you can do to change that."
I felt my heart sink as the keeper's words sank in. No, it couldn't be true. I couldn't be one of them, a creature of the night. But as I looked down at my arm, at the still healing bite mark, I couldn't deny the truth. I had been transformed, my very essence altered by the savage attack. The sheriff's grip on my arm tightened, and I winced, the pain searing through me. "We'll see about that," he growled, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. Before I could even react, the sheriff had drawn his gun, the weapon gleaming in the dim light of the chamber. The women recoiled, their expressions filled with a sudden primal fear. "This is for the keeper," the sheriff snarled, his finger tightening on the trigger. I watched in horror as the bullet tore through the air, heading straight for the keeper's heart. But just as it was about to strike, something extraordinary happened. The keeper raised his hand, and to my utter disbelief, the bullet simply stopped, suspended in midair, as if held by an invisible force. The sheriff's eyes widened, his expression a mix of shock and terror. "Impossible," he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. The keeper let out a low, rumbling laugh, his lips curling into a cruel smile. "You see, Sheriff, you are no match for us. We are creatures of power, of dark magic that you cannot even begin to comprehend." With a flick of his wrist, the keeper sent the bullet hurtling back towards the sheriff, the projectile moving with lightning speed. The sheriff barely had time to react before the bullet struck him in the chest, sending him reeling backwards. I watched, frozen in horror, as the sheriff crumpled to the ground, his gun clattering to the floor beside him. Blood blossomed from the wound, staining his uniform a deep crimson red. The keeper strode towards the fallen sheriff, his movements fluid and graceful. He crouched down beside the man, his eyes gleaming with a twisted sense of triumph. "You should have known better than to challenge us, Sheriff," he said, his voice low and menacing. "Now you will pay the ultimate price for your foolishness." He reached down, his fingers wrapping around the sheriff's throat, and I felt a surge of panic rise within me. "No, please," I cried, my voice desperate. "Don't kill him. He's just trying to help." The keeper turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Help?" he scoffed. "This man is no savior, boy. He is a hunter, a killer of our kind, and he must be dealt with accordingly." I opened my mouth to protest, to beg for the sheriff's life, but the words died on my lips as I watched the keeper tighten his grip. The sheriff let out a strangled gasp, his eyes widening in terror, and then he was still. I stared in horror as the life drained from the sheriff's body, his once vibrant features growing pale and lifeless. The keeper stood, a satisfied smirk on his face, and turned to the women.
Dispose of him, he said, his voice laced with disdain.
And make sure there are no loose ends. The women moved in, their expressions hungry, and I knew that I had to get out of here to escape this nightmare before it was too late. But as I turned to run, I felt a hand on my arm, the grip unyielding. It was Helena, her eyes narrowed with a predatory intensity. "And where do you think you're going, little one?" she purred, her voice dripping with malice. "You're one of us now, remember? You can't escape your fate." I stared at her, my heart pounding, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. How had this happened? How had I been dragged into this twisted, dark world of monsters and death? But even as the despair threatened to overwhelm me, a glimmer of hope flickered in the back of my mind. The sheriff, despite his transformation, had come here to stop these creatures, to save me. And even though he had failed, I knew that I couldn't give up. Not yet. I had to find a way out, to break free from this nightmare and reclaim my humanity. And if that meant facing the wrath of these vampires, then so be it. With a surge of defiance, I wrenched my arm from Helena's grasp, my eyes narrowing. "I won't be one of you," I growled, my voice laced with a determination I didn't know I possessed. "I'll find a way to break this curse, no matter what it takes." Helena's eyes widened in surprise, and then a cruel smile spread across her face. "Curse?" she scoffed. "Oh, child, this is no curse. This is a gift, a blessing bestowed upon us by the Ancient Ones." She moved closer, her eyes burning with an unholy light. "And you are one of us now, whether you like it or not. So you'd best get used to it, because there's no going back." I opened my mouth to retort, to tell her that she was wrong, that I would never accept this fate. But before I could, a sudden commotion from the far end of the chamber drew our attention. We turned to see one of the women, her face twisted in a mask of terror, rushing towards us. "They're coming," she cried, her voice shrill and panicked. "The hunters, they found us." The keeper's expression darkened, and he turned to the others, his voice commanding, "Quickly, we must make our escape. Gather what you can and follow me." The women sprang into action, their movements a blur as they gathered up what appeared to be various trinkets and artifacts. I watched, my mind racing, as they hurried towards a hidden tunnel at the back of the chamber. But as I made to follow, Helena grabbed me, her grip iron hard. "Not you, little one," she hissed. "You're coming with us." I struggled against her, my heart pounding. "No, I won't go with you," I cried, my voice laced with desperation. Helena's eyes narrowed, and I saw a flash of something akin to amusement in her gaze. "Oh, but you don't have a choice," she purred. "You're one of us now, remember?" With that, she dragged me towards the tunnel, and I knew that I had no choice but to go with them.
The hunters, whoever they were coming, and I couldn't risk being left behind to face them alone. As we fled through the winding, dark passages, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread and uncertainty. What would become of me now? Had I truly sealed my fate, doomed to be a creature of the night forever? And what of the sheriff, lying lifeless in that chamber? Had his sacrifice been in vain, or would someone else come to finish the job he had started? I didn't have the answers, but as we emerged into the cold, dark night, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of a new, terrifying chapter in my life, and I had no idea what was waiting for me beyond the shadows. The chapter ends with a shocking twist. The sheriff has been killed by the keeper, and the narrator is now a captive of the vampires, forced to flee with them as they escape from mysterious hunters. The vivid descriptions of the violence and the narrator's growing sense of desperation and uncertainty create a palpable sense of tension and drama. The introduction of the hunters adds a new layer of mystery and intrigue, leaving the reader eager to know more about who they are and what their role will be in the unfolding events. The emotional, accessible writing style keeps the narrative engaging and relatable, even as the plot takes a dark and sinister turn. The chapter ends on a cliffhanger, with the narrator's fate left uncertain, setting the stage for an exciting continuation of the story. The Lighthouse Keeper's Nightmare, Chapter 5. I can't believe it's finally over. After everything I've been through, I never thought I'd make it out alive. But somehow, against all odds, I did it. I escaped the clutches of those monsters. It all happened so fast I can barely wrap my head around it. 1 minute I was being dragged through the dark tunnels, Helena's grip like iron on my arm. The next, we were bursting out into the open, the cold night air biting at my skin. The other women were with us, moving with a speed and grace that was almost impossible to follow. I tried to break free, to make a run for it, but Helena just tightened her hold, hissing in my ear. "Don't even think about it, little one," she snarled. "You're coming with us, whether you like it or not." I glanced around frantically, searching for any sign of the sheriff or the hunters the woman had mentioned. But all I saw was a vast, shadowy landscape, the only light coming from the moon overhead. We ran for what felt like hours, the women never slowing, never showing any sign of fatigue. I, on the other hand, was rapidly growing exhausted, my legs burning with the effort. Finally, we reached what appeared to be an old, abandoned mansion, its walls crumbling and overgrown with vines. The women ushered me inside, their eyes scanning the area for any sign of pursuit. Once we were safely inside, Helena turned to me, her expression unreadable.
"Well, well, looks like your little friends didn't manage to catch up with us after all," she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. I glared at her, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "What do you want from me?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and defiance. Helena's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Want from you? Why, we want you to be one of us, of course, a part of our family, our coven." I shook my head vehemently. "No, I won't do it. I won't become a monster like you." Helena's expression darkened, and she took a step towards me, her eyes burning with a predatory intensity. "You don't have a choice, child," she hissed. "The transformation is already underway. You can either embrace it, or you can suffer the consequences." I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "I won't give in. I won't." But even as I spoke the words, I could feel the change taking hold. My senses were heightened, the sounds and smells around me overwhelming, and there was a strange tingling sensation in my veins, as if some primal power was coursing through me. Helena must have seen the conflicting emotions on my face, because her expression softened ever so slightly. "It's not as bad as you think, you know," she said, her voice almost gentle. "The power, the freedom, it can be intoxicating. All you have to do is let go and embrace your true nature." I shook my head, refusing to listen. "No, I won't do it. I won't become a monster." Helena sighed, her gaze unflinching. "Then I'm afraid you leave me no choice." Before I could react, she moved with lightning speed, her hand closing around my throat. I gasped, the air forced from my lungs as she lifted me off the ground, her grip unyielding. "You will join us," she hissed, her face mere inches from mine. I clawed at her hand, desperately trying to pry her fingers loose, but it was no use. Her strength was inhuman, her determination unwavering. As the darkness began to close in, a sudden commotion from outside drew our attention. Helena's grip loosened ever so slightly, and I gulped in a desperate breath of air. The sound of shattering glass and the roar of gunfire filled the air, and Helena's eyes widened in alarm. "The hunters," she growled, her gaze darting towards the entrance. Without warning, she dropped me, and I crumbled to the floor, gasping and coughing. As I looked up, I saw the other women rushing towards the sound of the commotion, their movements a blur. Summoning what little strength I had left, I scrambled to my feet and made a break for the exit, my heart pounding in my ears. I had to get out of here, had to find a way to escape these monsters once and for all. But as I reached the doorway, a figure emerged from the shadows, their face obscured by a mask. Before I could react, they raised a strange-looking device and pointed it at me, a bright flash of light erupting from the barrel. I cried out in pain as the light seared my eyes, my skin burning. It felt as if my very being was being torn apart, the transformation within me being forced into reverse. I fell to my knees, my vision blurring, and I heard the faint sound of voices, shouting in the distance. But I couldn't make out the words, the agony coursing through me too intense to focus on anything else. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the pain began to subside, and I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. The heightened senses, the primal power, it was all fading, replaced by a familiar, comforting sensation. I blinked, my eyes adjusting to the darkness,
and I saw the figure standing before me, their mask now removed. It was the sheriff, his face etched with a grim determination. "Easy there, son," he said, his voice gruff but laced with a hint of concern. "You're safe now." I stared at him in disbelief, my mind reeling. "But how?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The sheriff offered me a wry smile. "Let's just say I had a few tricks up my sleeve. Now, come on, we need to get out of here before those bloodsuckers come back." He helped me to my feet, and I followed him out of the crumbling mansion, my steps still unsteady. As we emerged into the cool night air, I saw that the other women were nowhere to be seen, and the sound of gunfire had faded into the distance. "What happened to them?" I asked, my gaze scanning the area. The sheriff's expression hardened. "They're gone, for now. But don't worry, my team will be keeping a close eye on them. We'll be ready when they try to resurface." I nodded, a sense of relief washing over me. The nightmare was finally over, or at least the worst of it. I was free, no longer a captive of those vampires. As we made our way back towards the lighthouse, the sheriff glanced at me, his brow furrowed. "So, you're the one they were after, huh?" he said, his voice low. I nodded, my gaze fixed on the ground. I don't know what happened to me. One minute I was just a normal person, and the next, I trailed off, the memory of the transformation still too fresh, too horrifying to put into words. The sheriff placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "Hey, don't worry, son. You're back to normal now, and that's all that matters. Whatever they did to you, we'll make sure it never happens again." I looked up at him, a glimmer of hope stirring in my chest. "So, I'm not one of them anymore?" The sheriff shook his head. "Nah, that light I hit you with, it's a special kind of UV radiation. Strips away the vampire curse, so to speak. You're back to being a good old human again." I let out a shaky laugh, the relief washing over me in waves. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for saving me." The sheriff chuckled, a wry grin spreading across his face. "Ah, don't mention it. It's all in a day's work for us vampire hunters."
As we approached the lighthouse, I couldn't help but feel a sense of sadness wash over me. The keeper, the man who had once been my only companion in this isolated place, was gone. And the sheriff, he had risked his life to stop those monsters, to save me. "What about the keeper?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "And the sheriff, the one who was killed? What happens now?" The sheriff's expression sobered, and he let out a heavy sigh. "The keeper, well, he's gone. We couldn't save him, I'm afraid. As for the other sheriff, he'll be honored for his bravery, for standing up to those creatures of the night." I nodded, a lump forming in my throat. "I see." The sheriff squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. "Hey, don't worry, kid. We'll make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain. We're going to keep a close eye on this place. Make sure those vampires don't come back." I managed a weak smile, the weight of everything that had happened finally beginning to sink in. As we stepped into the lighthouse, I couldn't help but feel a sense of nostalgia and loss. This place, which had once been my home, now felt tainted, haunted by the darkness that had consumed it. But as I looked around, I noticed something that hadn't been there before. A small wooden cross, its surface polished to a shine, stood on the windowsill, a silent tribute to the fallen sheriff. I reached out, running my fingers over the smooth wood, and felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was a reminder that even in the face of such darkness, there was still light, still hope. And as I stood there, the sheriff by my side, I knew that I would never forget the horrors I had witnessed, the transformation I had endured. But I also knew that I was stronger for it, more resilient, and that I would never take my humanity for granted again. "So, what happens now?" I asked, turning to the sheriff.
He smiled, a twinkle in his eye. "Well, kid, I think it's time you learned a thing or two about being a vampire hunter. What do you say?" I paused, considering his words, and then a grin spread across my face. "I say, when do we start?" And with that, the two of us set off, determined to ensure that the darkness that had once threatened to consume me would never again find a foothold in this lonely, isolated place. The lighthouse, once a beacon of hope, would now stand as a symbol of our triumph over the forces of evil, a testament to the power of the human spirit to overcome even the most daunting of challenges. As I walked away, I couldn't help but glance back at the lighthouse one last time, a sense of bittersweet nostalgia washing over me. The keeper, the sheriff, and the women, they had all played a part in this twisted tale, their fates intertwined in ways I could scarcely comprehend. But in the end, it was the light, the unwavering determination to fight against the darkness, that had prevailed.
And as the sheriff and I headed off into the night, I knew that this was only the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with adventure, danger, and the promise of a brighter future. The story concludes with the narrator being freed from the vampire curse and joining the sheriff as a new vampire hunter. The resolution is satisfying, with the narrator reclaiming his humanity and finding purpose in continuing the fight against the dark forces that had threatened him. The emotional, conversational tone remains consistent throughout, making the narrative feel personal and relatable. The final chapter ties up the loose ends, provides a sense of closure for the key characters, and leaves the reader with a hopeful outlook for the narrator's future. Overall, the story arc is complete, with a satisfying conclusion that leaves the reader satisfied yet eager to see what new adventures await the newly minted vampire hunter.